Thank you, Mr. President, and of course, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Security Council today on this very important issue. And forgive me for speaking bluntly, but I'd like to lay out for you very clearly what the world is facing at this very moment. At the same time, while we're dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, we're also on the brink of a hunger pandemic. In my conversations with world leaders over the past many months, before the coronavirus even became an issue, I was saying that 2020 would be facing the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II for a variety of reasons, such as the war in Syria, Yemen, the deepening crisis in places like South Sudan. And as John Eglin, I know, will no doubt set out about Burkina Faso in the central Sahel region. The desert locust swarms in Africa, as the Director General Chu highlighted in his remarks, and more frequent natural disasters and changing weather patterns that we're experiencing. The economic crisis in Lebanon, which is impacting millions of Syrian refugees, DRC, Sudan, Ethiopia, and the list goes on. We're already facing a perfect storm. So today with COVID-19, I want to stress that we're not only facing a global health pandemic, but also a global humanitarian catastrophe. Millions of civilians living in conflict-scarred nations, including many women and children, face being pushed to the brink of starvation, with the specter of famine a very real and dangerous possibility. This might sound truly shocking, but let me give you just some numbers. 821 million people go to bed hungry every night all over the world, chronically hungry. And as Dr. Chu just pointed out, as the new global report on food crisis that's published today shows, there are a further 135 million people facing crisis levels of hunger or worse. That means 135 million people on Earth are marching toward the brink of starvation. But now the World Food Program analysis shows also, due to the coronavirus, that an additional 130 million people could be pushed to the brink of starvation by the end of 2020. That's a total of 265 million people. On any given day now, WFP, we offer a lifeline to about 100 million people, up from about 80 million just a few years ago. This includes about 30 million people who literally depend on us to stay alive. If we can't reach these people with the life-saving assistance they need, our analysis shows that 300,000 people could starve to death every single day over a 3-month period. This does not even include the increase of starvation due to COVID. In a worst-case scenario, we could be looking at famine in about 36 countries. And in fact, 10 of these countries, we already have more than 1 million people per country who are on the verge of starvation. And in many places, this human suffering is a heavy price of conflict. At WFP, we are proud that the Council made the historic decision to pass Resolution 2417 in May 2018. It was amazing to see the Council come together. Now we have to live up to our pledge to protect the most vulnerable and act immediately to save lives around the world. But this is only, in my opinion, the first part of the strategy needed to protect conflict-riven countries from a hunger pandemic caused by the coronavirus. There's also a real danger that more people could potentially die from the economic impact of COVID-19 than from the virus itself. This is why I'm talking about a hunger pandemic. It is critical that we come together as one united global community to defeat this disease and protect the most vulnerable nations and communities from its potentially devastating effects. Lockdowns, economic recessions are expected to lead to a major loss of income among the working poor. Overseas remittances will also drop sharply. This will hurt countries like Haiti, Nepal, and Somalia, just to name a couple. The loss of tourism receipts will damage countries like Ethiopia, where it accounts for 47% of its total exports. The collapsing oil prices in lower income countries like South Sudan will have an impact significantly, where oil accounts for 98.8% of total exports. And of course, when donor countries' revenues are down, how much impact will this have on life-saving foreign aid? The economic and health impacts of COVID-19 are most worrisome for communities in countries across Africa as well as the Middle East because the virus threatens further damage to the lives and the livelihoods of people already put at risk by conflict. WFP and our partners are going all out to help them. We'll do everything we possibly can. For example, we know that children are particularly vulnerable to hunger and malnutrition, so we are prioritizing assistance to them. Right now, as you may know, 1.6 billion children and young people are currently out of school around the world due to lockdown. Nearly 370 million children of these children are missing out on nutritious school meals. You can only imagine when children don't get the nutrition, which means their immunity systems are down. But this is why we are providing nutritious school meals where we possibly can in these suspended areas to help, whether it's take-home rations to help the families and help these children. As you know, WFP is a logistics backbone for the humanitarian world, and even more so now for the global effort to beat this pandemic. We have delivered millions upon millions of personal protective equipment, testing kits, face masks to about 78 countries on behalf of the World Health Organization. We are also running humanitarian air services to get frontline health professionals, doctors, nurses, and humanitarian staff into countries that need help, especially while the passenger airline industry is basically about shut down. But we need to do more than this, and I urge the council to lead the way. First and foremost, we need peace. As the Secretary General recently said very clearly, a global ceasefire is essential right now. Second, we need all parties involved in the conflicts to give us swift and unimpeded humanitarian access to all vulnerable communities so that we can get the assistance to them that they need, regardless of who they are or where they are. We also need, in a very general sense, humanitarian goods and commercial trade to continue flowing across the borders because they are the lifeline of global food systems as well as the global economy. Supply chains have to keep moving if we are going to overcome this pandemic and get food from where it is produced to where it is needed. It also means resisting the temptation to introduce like export bans or import subsidies, which can lead to price hikes and almost always backfire. WFP, we're already working hand in glove with governments to build and strengthen national safety nets. This is critical right now to ensure fair access to assistance and to help maintain peace and stability and prevent rising tensions among communities. Third, we need coordinated action to support life-saving humanitarian assistance. For example, WFP, we are implementing plans to pre-position 3 months worth of food and cash to serve country operations identified as priorities. We're asking donors to accelerate the $1.9 billion in funding that has already been pledged so that we can build stockpiles and create the life-saving buffers and protect the most vulnerable from the effects of supply chain disruptions, commodity shortages, economic damage, and lockdowns. You understand exactly what I'm talking about. We're also requesting a further $350 million to set up a network of logistics hubs and transportation systems to keep the humanitarian supply chains moving around the world. They will also provide field hospitals and medical evacuations to the frontline humanitarians and health workers as needed and strategically. Excellencies, 2 years ago, the Security Council took a landmark step when it recognized and condemned the devastating human toll that conflict paid in poverty and hunger. Resolution 2417, it also highlighted the need for early warning systems. And today, I'm here to raise that alarm. There are no famines yet, but I must warn you that if we don't prepare and act now to secure access, avoid funding shortfalls, and disruptions to trade, we could be facing multiple famines of biblical proportions within a short few months. The actions that we take will determine our success or failure in building sustainable food systems as the basis of stable and peaceful societies. The truth is, we do not have time on our side, so let's act wisely and let's act fast. I do believe that our expertise and our partnerships, we can bring together the teams and the programs necessary to make certain the COVID-19 pandemic does not become a human and food crisis catastrophe.